Hey friends, it's Tomer. Duskmourn has just been fully previewed, and with it comes 27 brand new legendary creatures that can be your commander. So we're gonna go over all of them and rank them in an internet-friendly tier list. As always, this is not a power ranking guide. I'm not ranking every single card based on how powerful it is. Instead, I'm ranking these legendary creatures based on how much I personally like the card. So it's not an objective rating, it's purely subjective. Though, if you disagree with me, you're obviously wrong. No, I'm just kidding. At the tippity top of the ranking is the Tomer favorites. These are my absolute favorite legendary creatures from the set, and the ones that I'm most likely to actually build around, either for a stream or a commander clash, or even add it to my personal collection. Then there's Great in Command Zone. These are legendary creatures that I feel are better suited in the Command Zone rather than the 99. Then obviously Great in 99. These are ones that I think are better in the 99 than the Command Zone. Then there's the maybe pile. I'm just not quite sure how good the cards actually are. And then finally there's Trash. Trash doesn't necessarily mean these are bad cards per se. I just mean in the context of Commander, they're not really well suited for multiplayer. They might have other purposes where they're better in constructed 1v1 or maybe even limited 1v1, but I don't think they're actually good in Commander. Now, before we get into the ranking, a quick reminder that you can purchase all these sweet new cards, and any Magic cards really, over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. Alright, we're beginning alphabetically, of course, and we're starting with Altanak the Thrice Called. This is one of my favorite cards in the set. It's a 7 mana green, a legendary creature, insect beast. It's a 9/9 of trample, and whenever it becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card, and you can pay 2 mana, 1 and a green, discard this card from your hand, and return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Now, I absolutely love this card. It's a big old beater, and it has a cool, basically a channel ability. You discard it, pay some mana, and you get a cool effect where you're basically land ramping, land recurring from a graveyard straight to the battlefield. I think that's a really cool ability. But that said, it's not very good in Commander. I mean, it's okay in Commander actually, but it was made for Limited. And the reason why is because they also printed a common in this set called Say Its Name, where if you exile this and 2 other cards named Say Its Name from the graveyard, you can just search your library for Altanak and just immediately put it onto the battlefield. It doesn't matter where it is, graveyard, hand, or library. You just find it and you put it onto the battlefield. Absolutely hilarious, really, really cool. It's very reminiscent to me to a much worse version of this card, which was the Unspeakable, where you had to play 3 instants. You had to just like straight up cast the 3 instants, which was a lot of mana, and you had to have 3 specific instants that you could cast all in the same time. And if you did so, then you could actually find the Unspeakable and put it directly onto the battlefield. But it couldn't even do it from like the hand or graveyard. You had to do it specifically from the library. Much, much worse version, much jankier version. This one is far more playable, and it relies entirely on just like 1 common, 3 copies of it, and then you just have an uncommon that you cheat out very, very easily. So this card looks like a blast in Limited. Like, I just absolutely can't wait to play Duskmourn Limited so I can pull off this little janky combo thing. But in Commander, it's much more tame, obviously, because you can't cheat it out with Say Its Name. It's a singleton format. You can't run more than 1 copy of Say Its Name. So I don't believe you can actually cheat it out for that ability. But, I mean, by itself, the channel ability is actually quite good. So in a Reanimator deck, it's actually not the worst thing possible. So yeah, the card is playable by itself. It's not super impressive, but it is a very powerful card for an uncommon at the very least. And in Limited, it's like the most exciting thing for me. I just can't wait to pull it off. So Altanak, while probably being my absolute favorite card in the entire set, for Commander, I think it's like a maybe. I don't think it's great in the 99, but it's definitely playable. So I would put it in the maybe pile. Like, if you're in a Reanimator deck, specific decks might actually want to run it. It's definitely a budget inclusion at the very least for Reanimator, but it's not like super impressive. Next, we've got one of the face commanders of the precons. It is Aminatou Veil Piercer. This is a 4 mana Esper legendary creature human wizard. It's a 2/4, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 2, and each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. So Aminatou is Esper Enchantress with a twist. It is focusing on the Miracle mechanic. What that means is that you're going to be focusing on Enchantress stuff, like any Enchantress deck, which is, pretty standard. However, you're going to be focusing more on top deck manipulation to make sure that you have enchantments on top of your library at any given time, and then being able to draw cards on your opponent's turns as mana efficiently as possible. Because if the top card of your library is an enchantment, you can miracle it out. So you can bypass timing restrictions. You just the first card you draw, if it is an enchantment, you can miracle it. You can immediately cast it for its miracle cost. And Amanatu not just makes all your enchantments into miracles, but also gives you a massive mana reduction to it as well, of 4. So obviously there are a ton of top end, very splashy haymaker enchantments out there, like Omniscience, for example, that when you can cast for 4 less mana becomes incredibly powerful. You just take a really good card and you make it that much better by casting it for 4 less mana. It's incredibly powerful. So I really like the twist on Enchantress here. Enchantress by itself, it's been done 1,000 times before, but Miracle really hasn't. So it's really cool to see that. And it's a cool callback to the original Amanatu, which is also top deck manners, top deck manipulation. So it's a callback, but also an evolution of the character. It feels like a natural progression, which is really cool. And Amanatu herself also helps you with the top deck manipulation too, because she's also surveilling 2 on each of your upkeeps. So this is like Enchantress, Drago, Miracles Matters. You want to have a nice combination of Enchantress stuff, but also top deck manipulation, but also being able to draw at least 1 card very mana efficiently on each of your opponent's turns. It's a lot of effects to juggle, but the payoff is obviously there. I really like Amanatu. I would say it's somewhere between my favorite and just great in the command zone. I would say the only thing stopping it from being my favorite is I'm just kind of tired of Enchantress. There have been so many Enchantress prequels. I think Enchantress in general has been the most built commander precon out there. I think they've done it at least 4 times at this point, and I'm just kind of tired of it. I really love the miracle mechanic. I love the unique twist on it, but me personally, I just can't get behind more Enchantress. If it was any other archetype mixed with Miracle, I would be 100% Tomer favorite without a doubt. But the fact that they took Miracle and they mixed it with Enchantress just makes me a little bit tired of it. Because it's going to be, at the end of the day, it's going to be an Enchantress shell. So it's going to be 70% of the cards are generic Enchantress stuff, and then the 30% are going to be the unique stuff where you're focusing a little bit more on top deck manipulation, a little bit more on draw-go style play. Next, we've got Arabella, Abandoned Doll, and I really like this one. This is a 2-mana Boros legendary artifact creature toy. It's a 1/3, and whenever it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is a number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. I love this card. It's just an uncommon, but it's so straightforward in how you want to build it and so effective, and yet there's so much build around potential around it. This is essentially like Boros Go Wide Burn. You want to flood the table with an army of small creatures, usually with a token strategy. And then you don't necessarily need to attack with all of them. You just need to attack with Arabella. And Arabella will reward you by dealing massive amounts of damage to each of your opponents, and then you gain X life. So it's a huge life swing boost too. The damage potential here is staggering. If you have, say, 20 1/1s on the battlefield and you swing with Arabella, that means you dealt 20 damage to each of your opponents and you gain 20 life. That's amazing. But obviously, you have to work to get the value out of this. First of all, you need to go wide tokens, which is a very fragile game plan. You put a bunch of 1/1s on the battlefield and a board wipe will make you super sad. Then you also need to give Arabella evasion. So stuff like a Whisper Silk Cloak or whatever is going to be really effective on her. And then you will also want to maximize the type of damage you're doing with Arabella. For example, giving her lifelink means you're going to be gaining an egregious amount of life, because if you're doing say 10 damage to each opponent and then you gain 10 life, if you have lifelink on Arabella, that means you're also gaining an additional 30 life, so you gain 40 life off that swing. Amazing. And then maybe you can build a life gain strategy into Arabella. And there's also a ton of, red cards that say if you deal non-combat damage, you deal double that non-combat damage instead. Or if you deal non-combat damage to your opponent, you can deal damage to a creature they control, like Chandra's Incinerator. So there's a lot of build-around potential on this card. It's a very straightforward effect. It kind of tells you what style of play this deck is very efficiently. It's an uncommon, it's a signpost uncommon for limited, and yet I think it translates so well into Commander. And also it's a 2-drop, meaning it's incredibly reliable. Like if you want to build around Arabella, it's really important that either it's resilient to removal, which it's not, or it's very cheap so you can recast it a few times, and it is. It's only 2 mana. So I love this card. It's go wide, it is burn, it's very straightforward, it's aggro. I personally love aggro decks. Like I'm basically the only aggro player at the table usually, and I like to speed up games a little bit because like 4 control decks at a commander table is just like my nightmare these days. So I'm always playing aggro. I'm always looking for more fun aggro commanders out there, and Arabella kind of ticks all my boxes. So yeah, Arabella, definitely a favorite of mine. I'm not going to add her to my paper collection or whatever, but if I had to build a deck for Commander Clash for Duskmourn or something, this would be like top of my list. Next we have Kian, Corrupted Memory. This is the secondary commander in the Simic Precon. It's a 4-mana Simic legendary creature illusion. It's a 2/2, and as long as its power is even, you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash, and as long as its power is odd, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Kian. So this card is an interesting design around basically draw go. It allows you to cast your spells at instant speed, but it has a restriction of you can only cast either creatures at instant speed or non-creatures at instant speed, depending on Kian's power. So there is a hoop to jump through. And the other really cool thing is that it turns card draw into an actual win condition, because as you're drawing cards, Kian gets bigger and bigger. Eventually, it's going to be big enough that it can 1-tap or 2-tap your opponents. And you're in blue, which means you have a bunch of ways of giving this creature unblockable when you need to go for the kill. So I like it. I haven't seen a draw go commander in a hot minute, and I don't think of any of them in Simic colors. Maybe I could be wrong, but most of them are usually like Azorius colors in my opinion. So seeing it in Simic's kind of cool. There's obviously some payoffs for going draw go too. There's like a bunch of blue creatures that give you a bit of a bonus if you're casting the first spell on your opponent's turn. So you can go really deep on the draw go strategy. You can also go like deep on the draw strategy where like draw matters, just fill up on card draw and stuff. And you can also weave in some like +1/+1 counter synergies too. I personally would love to put in Hardened Scale in this deck. Like yes, it makes it a little bit clunky in that if you have Hardened Scale and Kian on the battlefield, basically you're never going to flip her from either casting creature spells or non-creature spells, because, you know, you draw a card, you get 2 counters on Kian. If she's already, her power's odd, it will continue staying on, so you're always stuck casting creature spells. However, every single time you draw a card, that's a separate trigger for +1/+1 counters, which means Hardened Scale just means you just double the amount of +1/+1 counters on Kian for just 1 mana enchantment, which means you're going to be killing people very, very quickly. So I'm still on the Hardened Scale plan, because I'd much rather kill my opponent than like continue to dirtle with swapping between casting creatures and casting non-creatures at instant speed, personally. But yeah, it's a really cool design, and it's also kind of funny that we learned about the initial design of Nadu was like 3 mana, all your spells have flash, and then it had like you draw a card if your opponents target your stuff. This feels like a much nerfed version of that version of Nadu, so there is like a conspiracy that I've heard on the internets that another reason why Nadu was changed last minute was it was just like overshadowing one of the cards coming in a precon the very next set, or well, sorry, the next 2 sets over. I don't buy that. I don't think that's true. I think people were just like, oh, this card's too good and it has flash for everything, it's too easy, and then he just made a more busted version for Commander for no reason. But I think it was just like a straight up oopsie, but a very silly oopsie. But I don't think like Nadu was actually changed because Kian was coming up and they have some overlap. Anywho, I think this is great in the command zone. It's an interesting commander. It's draw go meets draw meets +1/+1 counters. Definitely some build around potential. Next we have the commander that the Commander Clash crew, at least, is the most scared of. This is Kona Rescue Beastie. It's a 4-mana green legendary creature beast survivor. It's a 4/3 and it has survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So if Kona is tapped, you just get to cheat out any permanent from your hand. That means if you have like a Springlift Drum or a haste enabler like Lightning Greaves or any vehicle on the battlefield that Kona can crew, you can just play Kona, tap it very easily, and then on your second main phase, you can take a permanent card, the best permanent card from your hand, and put it directly onto the battlefield. It could be like a Vorinclex. It could be like a Zendikar Resurgent. It could be anything super scary, and then your opponents are in a terrified state. I think this card is very, very powerful. Being mono green is a little bit limiting in terms of what permanents you have to cheat out, and it being in the command zone also means you still have to juggle certain things in your hand, because you're only cheating stuff from your hand, not like other zones. You're not cheating them out from the graveyard, you're not cheating them out from the library. They have to be in your hand already. So you need to have like ramp, you need to have protection spells, you need to have lands, you need to have ways of tapping down Kona very efficiently, and then you obviously have to have permanent haymakers. So I don't know, you're not always going to have like a scary permanent in your hand to cheat into the battlefield. There is some inconsistency involved because your deck is not entirely just scary permanents that you'll have in your hand at any given time. That said, though, I think this is a kind of scary commander, right? Like at any given time, you can tap it very, very easily. And in any given time, you can cheat out like a very scary thing. It's kind of like Kalia, If you have Kalia on the battlefield, anytime you swing, it could be a game-ending threat, right? But sometimes they just have nothing. And that's what Kona is, basically. It's like mono green. Think of it like mono green Kalia, where every single time it's tapped, if it goes into the second main phase and survives, something very scary that you potentially can't even deal with is going to come down onto the battlefield. So it's like a #1 threat. So I do think it is a very powerful commander. I do think it is a very scary commander. I think it will run into some inconsistency issues, but just draw more cards and it will smooth that out, obviously. Like if you're casting things that say, draw 4 cards, draw 5 cards or whatever, which is abundant in green, you should be able to always have something pretty scary to cheat out with Kona. So it's just like a very powerful ramp source, essentially. I do think Kona is also great in the 99, but I think it's most powerful in the command zone. So I'm going to put in Gray in command zone. All right, now we come to the commander for the new set mechanic. This is the room commander, Marina Vendrell. This is a 5-color Wooburg legendary creature human warlock. It's a 3/5, and when it enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library, put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and then you can tap it, lock or unlock a door of target room you control, activate only as a sorcery. So all rooms are enchantments. It's a subtype of enchantment. So it makes sense that Marina is essentially 5-color enchantress that focuses on the subtype of room. Her ETB is general. You can get any enchantment card and not just room cards whenever it enters, but its tap ability makes you clearly focus on rooms in particular. Now, the awkward thing about a room deck is that most rooms, or at least the good rooms really, kind of deal with their own specific archetype. Like some of them, for example, Charred Foyer Warped Space. This one is clearly focusing on like Exile Matters. It's like for a Prosper deck. Dazzling Theater Prop Room is focusing on like a creature deck. You want to convoke out your creatures, maybe have a way to cast them at instant speed, and then Prop Room untaps all of them. So the good ones, they're all focusing on their own archetypes, which means trying to throw them all together in the same deck is going to be a little bit clunky. Obviously, some of them are more generic than others, but for the most part, like throwing all the rooms together when they're all supporting different archetypes is going to be a little bit awkward. Nonetheless, if you do want to throw a bunch of rooms together, Marina is the commander for you. That's her role, essentially. She is the 5-color enchantress deck for rooms, much like Go Shintai is the 5-color enchantress for shrines, but obviously shrines all work well together, unlike rooms. I guess she's the best analog to like Tom Bombadil, which is 5-color sagas, which again, sagas don't necessarily all work well together, but I think there's so many sagas out there at this point, and we keep getting more and more of them, that you can kind of cobble together the most synergistic ones to make it a more cohesive a deck. Whereas Marina Vendrell, I don't know when we're going to see rooms again. Maybe it will actually see a return and then the deck will get a little bit better. But for now, we just don't have that many rooms to cobble together a deck. So what I expect Marina to be mostly is either a combo deck, if you can like assemble some room combos and untap Marina infinite times and open and close rooms infinite times and maybe win the game that way. Or this is going to be more like generic 5-color Enchantress with a couple rooms, and then Marina gets to, you know, activate her ability every once in a while. Or maybe you can go like 5-color Enchantress Blink, because the Blink ability is actually pretty decent. You get to dig 7 cards and put an enchantment into your hand every single time. So maybe you could just go like 5-color Blink Enchantress, and then, you know, maybe have a couple rooms that fit the Blink archetype, and that's it. So yeah, if you're trying to focus just like on rooms, I don't think a lot of people are actually going to be doing that, but like, for the people who do, Wizards of the Coast has made a room commander for that. I don't know. I feel like this commander was made out of obligation, not to like make a really good deck or something. So I'm gonna put it in the maybe pile. I don't see that much appeal with Marina, but I could be wrong. Maybe I need to have a closer look at the rooms. Okay, next we've got Marvin Murderous Mimic. 2-mana colorless, legendary artifact creature toy. It's a 2/2, and it has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature. Now, this just seems like a straight up combo creature, right? Like you just have all activated abilities of all creatures. It'll probably have something that like taps, something that untaps, find infinite mana somehow, maybe turn some permanents into creatures temporarily to have their activated abilities too. I have no idea. I did not look up the combo potential of Marvin, but like I think that was the design intent of this card, is just to, like, combo off. I have no idea how you're going to combo off. Let me know in the comment section how you do it. I do think, though, it's probably going to be harder to combo off with Marvin in the command zone than in the 99, just because if you have Marvin in the command zone, then you have only access to color spells. It's a colorless commander, so you're much more restricted on what combos you can actually pull off. The only upside is obviously that you have your combo piece in the command zone if you can pull off a colorless combo somehow. But it's probably going to be much easier to pull off combos with Marvin in the 99 instead, because then you have a larger card pool to work with. And hey, maybe one of the combo pieces with Marvin could be that commander itself. You could put that combo piece in the command zone, then tutor up Marvin, and then find your other combo pieces and win the game that way. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I'm sure there has to be combos out there, right? There has to be. So Marvin, I'm just going to assume is great in the 99. I'm too smooth-brained to know what the combos are, but I'm expecting there are many. Next, we've got a new Nashi. This is Nashi, Searcher in the Dark. It's a 2-mana Dimir legendary creature, Rat Ninja Wizard. It's a 2/2 with Menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you mill that many cards. You may put any number of legendary and or enchantment cards from among them into your hand. If you put no cards into your hand this way, put a +1/+1 counter on Nashi. So Nashi is quite interesting. This is a unique twist on self-mill. I think usually for like self-mill effects, they don't require combat damage. I think usually when you're milling your opponents, you deal combat damage to them. But off the top of my head, I can't think of like another legendary creature that's just like, yeah, whenever you deal damage, you mill yourself. That's a cool ability. So I see this as like the mere, well, obviously legendary or enchantress or both, right? Like it's the Dimir Enchantress, Dimir Legendaries with a strong mill sub-theme. So you want to pump up Nashi to mill as many cards as possible, and then the more Legendaries and enchantments you mill, the more value you get. Now, Enchantress support is very limited in Dimir colors. Generally speaking, Enchantress is most supported in white and green, so if you don't have access to either of those, it gets a little bit sus. So I would assume that the most popular builds of Nashi are going to be self-mill and focusing on legendary. And I think actually legendaries are also mostly supported most in white and green, weirdly enough. So that's going to be a little bit awkward, but I don't know. It's cute. I'm interested. I'm interested in this card. It looks cool. I think the sheer amount of milling you can do with this card so efficiently for 2 mana, and the fact that it can generate so much card advantage, more importantly, for a 2-drop for no additional mana cost is very enticing to me. I feel like there has to be a really powerful deck built around Nashi. I just don't know if it's going to be legendaries or enchantress or both. I don't know how the 99 is going to look like, but I am very excited to run it in the command zone. You know what? I think it's one of my favorites. I'm going to put it up here. I'm very excited to actually run Nashi now. I kind of hyped myself into it. Next we have Nico, Light of Hope. This is a 4-mana Azorius, legendary creature, human wizard. It's a 3/4, and when it enters, create 2 shard tokens. Shard tokens are enchantments with pay 2 mana, sacrifice as enchantments, scry 1, then draw a card. So it's basically like superior clue tokens, but they're enchantments instead of artifacts. You can also pay 2 mana, tap it, exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Now this is a very interesting commander. I feel like it really wants you to be a blink commander. You want to blink Nico to get more shard tokens, and then you want to use Nico's ability and other just blink abilities to blink your non-legendary creatures, and then you could have an army of those creatures until end of turn. What is 99 going to look like? I have no idea, but it is very enticing, right? Like, there has to be some really powerful non-legendary creatures you can copy that maybe have like very powerful attack triggers, for example, that will be very enticing if you have an army of shard tokens. And if you like blink Nico Hall a bunch of times, every single time you blink Nico, you make 2 more shards. There are also enchantment tokens too, so constellation effects are going to be working very well with it. And then basically, if you can like meld together Enchantress meets Blink, I feel like you could utilize the card very, very well. Yeah, I like this card. It's very sick. It's cool. Nico to me is great in the command zone. Maybe a favorite. I'm not quite sure. I'm very enticed by it, but I'm going to be more picky with my Tomor favorites. Like the ones that I'm going to definitely be building around in the near future, that'll be in the favorite section. Anything else will be in the other categories, I think. Nico's just like creeping up there. We'll see. Maybe I bump him up. We'll see. Next, we have a new Norn. That's a fun surprise. I thought he was dead. Norn, Swift Survivalist. Old man Norn, 100 years old or whatever. It's a 1-mana red. Legendary creature, human coward. It's a 2/1. It can't block, and whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. Interesting. It's not as powerful as old school Norn, which was just like this blink engine that was super fun with like impact tremors or whatever. This one, it's a very interesting if your opponents block your creatures, because then you can pseudo blink them. You have to cast them from exile, but then if you're building like a cast from exile matters type deck, maybe that is a cool benefit. You also have to force your opponents to block you in order to get value out of it. I don't think this card is good. It is very interesting. Like, there's definitely, it's screaming build around. I just don't know if like this could be a commander, right? Like, it's an interesting commander because a 1-drop commander in itself is always very interesting to me. It means you always have a turn 1 play. But can you force blocks in red? Let me check. There are cards that force blocking, and some equipment. There's not a lot in red, but there are a couple. I don't know. No, I don't think this is gonna work out. Like, maybe you put Norn in a Gruul deck in the 99, because green usually traditionally has the best ways of forcing blocks. But even then, I don't know, man. I don't think this is very good. This is probably in trash. Okay, next we have the secondary commander of the Golgari precon. This is a Renmaw Creaking Nest. It's a 5-mana Golgari legendary artifact creature Scarecrow. It's a 5/5 of Menace Reach. And when it enters, and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a tapped 2/2 black bird creature token with flying. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. So Renmaw is a really cool commander. This is from the Delirium precon, which cares about having, I think, 4 or more different card types in the graveyard. And Renmaw is kind of cares about Delirium, right? Because the best way of activating Delirium is not just having a variety of card types in your deck, but also having a lot of cards that are multiple card types, because that means you need less cards in your graveyard to fulfill Delirium. But Red Maul doesn't actually care about the graveyard at all. It actually cares about playing the cards with multiple card types. And when you do that, then you give everybody bird creature tokens that are goaded. And the nice thing is that they're all come into play tapped. So they don't like run into each other immediately. Like the next player in line will untap their goaded bird. They attack somebody else. And the other people's goaded boards don't have a chance to actually block because they're all tapped. So I like the idea of just like making a bunch of bird tokens and then watching your opponents just murder each other with crows. Like that's just like a funny idea to me. So it's Delirium matters, it makes a bunch of tokens, it has goad matters too. A lot of build around potential here. And also it doesn't require you to cast the cards with multiple card types. You can just play the cards too. So the actually best way of triggering Ren Maul are actually lands that have multiple card types of them. There's a bunch of artifact lands, for example, that will do this. And then if you have ways of playing multiple lands per turn, you can easily trigger Red Maul multiple times in a single turn cycle without actually paying that much mana to do so. And ramping you in the process. So yeah, this is an exciting commander to me. I really like it, but I think it's going to be more popular in the 99 just because there's so many Reaper King degenerates out there who just love vindicating everybody's lanes and horribleness. And generally speaking, Reaper King was held in check, mostly because everybody hates it, and it's like the de facto arch enemy the moment you show it at the table, but also because Scarecrows kind of suck. Like the best way of building a Reaper King deck was not actually running Scarecrows, it was just copying Reaper King with a bunch of clone effects. Now, Duskmourn has brought a whole bunch of new Scarecrows, and most of them are actually really good. So I think Reaper King decks are going to see a surge of popularity to the detriment of commander playgroups everywhere. But the good news is for everybody who hates Reaper King is people are still going to hate Reaper King, and it's going to be hated out of most tables anyway. So it's not going to change too much. So Ren Maul, great in the command zone. I love the design of this one. Next we have a Selesnya, kind of like a vehicles commander, honestly. It's Rip, Spawn Hunter. It's a 4-mana Selesnya, legendary creature, human survival. It's a 4/4 with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Rip is tapped, reveal the top X cards of your library where X is its power. Put any number of creature and or vehicle cards with different powers from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Rip is an incredibly potent, mana efficient card advantage engine. If your deck is loaded with vehicles and or creatures, just having any way of tapping Rip and growing its power means you're going to be drawing a silly amounts of cards. So I think the ideal focus on Rip is either pumping up Rip. You probably want to be pumping up Rip anyway, but pumping up Rip so it can survive combat, so it can tap and attack, and you can get that survival trigger on your second main. Or if you're like a vehicle deck, you don't actually need to attack with Rip. You could just use Rip to crew up vehicles, and then that's another way of tapping it down. So I think Rip is actually an incredibly potent commander. Either if you're focusing on creatures, then it's a really good creature deck. I think it's less interesting as Selesnya creatures just because there are so many Selesnya creature commanders anyway. I think it's much more exciting as a vehicle commander because that's, I think, a design space that we haven't really explored that much, Selesnya vehicles. In that respect, it's very much like, basically it's a power crept Depala, right? Instead of getting a lot of card advantage by spending mana, God forbid, you just get it for free with Rip by just having it tapped. So it's just way better, and it's not tied. It's not also restricted to dwarves either, so you can play good creatures instead of dwarves, and get your vehicles and better creatures that way with Rip too. So yeah, if you like Depala, but you want to play a power cup version of it, you just play Rip instead. I still like Depala way more because it's old school cool. You have to work for it a little bit more, and it's dwarves, and I much prefer dwarves than genericness. But yeah, I think if you want to go Selesnya vehicles, it's a cool new design space that I am marginally excited for. I'm just kind of a little bit salty that it's like so power crept over Depala. I can't really get over that too much, but I have to grudgingly agree that it is a cool vehicle commander, and it's also a good creature commander too. I just think there's more competition in Selesnya creature commanders. So yeah, Rip, definitely great in the command zone, also really good in the 99 too. Next we have is this Boros Kikijiki. This is Jolly Balloon Man. 3 mana Boros, a legendary creature human clown, and say 1/4 with haste. You can pay 1 mana, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, except it's a 1/1 red balloon creature in addition to its other colors and types, and it has flying and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So Jolly Balloon Man is very exciting to me. It's very different than your typical Boros strategy of going wide and attacking. This one is all about making token copies of your cool utility creatures, I guess, like copying things with attack triggers, copying things with enter the battlefield triggers, copying things with death triggers. You can copy all those things. You have to pay 1 mana, which is very little, and tap it to get that value. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of ways to untap the Jolly Balloon Man, maybe make a lot of mana with its ability, maybe go infinite, who knows. But even if you play it straight without combos, I think it's a very exciting commander with a lot of build around potential. I really do hope that there are combos with the Jolly Balloon Man, hopefully that resemble Kiki combos, because then I can kind of live up to my reputation of being the Kiki player, even though I've done Kiki maybe like 3 times in the 7-year history, 8-year history of Commander Clash. Nonetheless, I can't escape that reputation, and I would love to embrace it by playing this in a future Commander Clash or something, and just going like secret Kiki combo on everybody. That would be very funny to me. So yeah, Jolly Balloon Man, just because it's like the Kiki combo-ish commander, I don't even know if it actually is a Kiki combo commander, but I'm hoping it is. I have to love it. It has to be top of my favorites. Next we have the Lord of Pain. It's a 5 mana Rakdos, 5/5 legendary creature, human assassin. It has menace, your opponents can't gain life, and whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player, the Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. So this is like if Kaervek, the original Kaervek, and Vile Smasher the Fierce both had a baby, right? Like, it's 5 mana, so it's smack dab in the middle. Everybody can contribute to the pain. Everybody is being pained together, which is hilarious. And your opponents can't gain life, so the pain is actually much more scary, even against like a life gain deck or anybody who has ways of recouping their losses. As long as the Lord of Pain is on the battlefield, your opponents are going to feel the pain, and they're not going to be able to escape it, which is very cool. This is a nice twist on like the burn group slug archetype. Again, in red colors especially, there's a lot of support for like these style of burn decks where you could double the damage, you can turn that damage into life gain if you give it lifelink, you can do all the things that I mentioned before with Arabella. Same things applies to Lord of Pain because it's the one dishing out the pain. So yeah, I love the design. There's lots of build around space behind it. Really, really cool card. All right, Lord of the Pain, definitely great in the command zone. Next we have the Master of Keys, the secondary commander of the Esper Enchantress Miracles deck. This is X, white, blue, black, so minimum 3 mana. It's a legendary enchantment creature horror. It has a 3/3 flyer. When it enters, put X +1/+1 counters on it and mill twice X cards. And each enchantment card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. So this is basically Graveyard Enchantress on a commander. The first ability just makes it really, really big when it enters the battlefield, mills you a lot. And then the second ability is basically Underworld Breach permanently, but only for enchantment spells. So it's massive graveyard recursion, massive graveyard filler if you have enough mana to pay the X cost for a lot, and then it's massive card advantage because you can just keep casting enchantments from your graveyard instead of your hand or whatever. It's awesome. So it's Enchantress again, but it is Graveyard Enchantress, which is not unique, but more interesting than just generic Enchantress. It's better than just like, if you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card, you know? Like, at least it's better than that, but not by much. It's probably better than just if you cast an Enchantress, draw a card, honestly. Like, this card is cracked. This card is very, very strong. I think it's probably stronger than the face commander Amanatu, but I am less interested in this one. It feels like too easy to break. You just, cast this, self-mill, have a big, lots of enchantments in your graveyard and just win from there? I don't know. I'm not really interested in this card, honestly. It's very strong. It's very strong. I don't want to yuck everybody's yum here. If you love Enchantress and you're like, finally, a Graveyard Enchantress deck. I was hoping for this. It had to be Esper colors. It couldn't be Abzan because we already had a Graveyard Enchant. We had like multiple Graveyard Enchantress decks in Abzan, but we swapped out green for blue, and now this is the one for me. I'm so excited. If you're excited, genuinely happy for you. I'm just tired of Enchantress. Just tired of Enchantress. It's great in the command zone. Obviously, very, very strong card. I just don't care. Sorry. Okay, we move on to a commander I genuinely do care about because it seems so awful, so rare, so exciting. It is the Mind Skinner. It's a 3-mana triple blue, I might say, triple devotion to blue even. Legendary enchantment creature Nightmare. It's a 10-1, which is what a beautiful stat block. And the Mind Skinner can't be blocked. And if a source you control will deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. So the Mind Skinner is trying to kill you with mill. This is not like the first ever blue mill commander out there. Obviously, we have like Brutavac, I think. Which one's the one? I think it's Brutavac, which was like if you traumatize someone, you just mill their entire library and you win the game that way. This one requires a little bit more working to get it. You gotta punch people in the face. You prevent the damage. But then you mill them that many cards. It's very interesting. It's also mono blue, so you don't have access to like Dimir for like, you know, you mill your opponents incrementally and then you get to reanimate their stuff. That's like a very Dimir thing to do. You like reanimate your opponent's creatures from the graveyard that you mill or whatever. This one you're stuck in blue, so you're just doing like honest to goodness milling. And I don't know if you can really do that much with the cards your opponents are milling. Now, I'm not saying the Mind Skinner is a bad card. Like, the mill is actually very efficient. Like, Mind Skinner itself, for example, can't be blocked, and it's guaranteed 10 damage to your opponents. The damage is prevented, but then you mill each opponent 10 cards at the very least. So you could go, like, straight up, like, Voltron, I guess, and try to, like, put double strike on this and something and like really go ham on the milling and try to like deck people out the fairway. There might be like also infinite combos with this that I'm not aware of that will make this much more easy to win off milling. And there also are a lot of cards in blue that allow you to take advantage of the cards in your opponent's graveyard that you are milling. So there's like Deluxe Dragster, for example. If you hit them with the Dragster, actually, wait, no, that prevents combat damage. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. There has to be like attack triggers or something to use your opponent's graveyard. I don't know. This card is so rare, so beautiful. I love it. Krim absolutely loves this card. I'm very excited to see what he does with it on Commander Clash. I'm really rooting for him. But yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see. This to me is a Tomer favorite. I don't know if it's good, but at the very least is very memey. Next, we've got the Swarm Weaver. It is a 4-mana Golgari legendary artifact creature Scarecrow. It's a 2/3, and when it enters, create 2 1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying. It also has Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. Okay, this is really cool. It has an ETB of just putting some cool 1/1s on the battlefield, and then when you have Delirium, so this is a Delirium deck again, your insects and spiders get bigger and have Death Touch, becoming really good blockers. I feel like this card is going to be a slam dunk in basically insect and spider decks, because insect and spider decks are usually both like self-mill decks. Like the most popular spider deck is Ishkana, for example. You want to be self-milling yourself. It also has Delirium, so you know this is a shoe-in for that. And then insect decks like Grist, for example, they're also all about self-mill. So they're both self-mill decks. So I think Swarm Weaver just kind of slots into the 99 of those. Its ECB effect is fine, but it's not like super exciting to build around. Like, yes, you could do like a Nim Deathmantle Ashnod's Altar combo if you really wanted to, but like that's not very exciting, and a lot of other commanders can do that too. I think you just want to jam this in like your insect and spider deck, and you have a Scarecrow that you know, it doesn't fit the insects or spiders itself, but you know, it's a cool anthem for your insect and spider decks. So yeah, I think this one is great in the 99 of 2 archetypes. Next, we've got the Wandering Rescuer. It's a 5 mana white legendary creature, human samurai noble. It's a 3/4 with flash and convoke, so your creatures can help cast a spell by being tapped down to pay for their mana cost. It has double strike, and other tapped creatures you control have hexproof. This is a really cool protection spell. Like, you can convoke this, you can pay as little as 0 mana if you tap 5 creatures. And then the tap down creatures that you use either to convoke or they're already tapped down anyway, they have hexproof. So if somebody tries to snipe one of your creatures, like a Swords to Plowshares on one of your creatures, you can convoke it out. Like if it's untapped, for example, you can convoke it out to pay for the Wandering Rescuer, and then bam, you have a 3/4 double striker on the battlefield with flash that can ambush a creature or whatever that is attacking you, and it protects the creature that was being targeted by removal. So it's cute. It's not really like, I don't think it's like a build around really. Like maybe it is, I don't think so. But it is a nice little way of having a little bit of protection for your go wide style deck. That said, is it enough? It's just hexproof, so it's not going to be helping against board wipes. So I think it's very meta specific. If you have playgroups that are very heavy on targeted removal and very light on board wipes, then the Wandering Rescue gets a lot better. Personally though, I've been shifting my decks at least more and more towards board wipes rather than target removal. Like I'll have like 3 target removal spells in my deck for creatures at least. And then I'll run like 3 to 4 board wipes. And that number is going up as like power creep keeps happening because people keep snowballing way too fast. So I don't know. I guess it depends on the meta if it's a good or not protection spell. By itself, it's like a 3/4 double striker, which is nice in like equipment decks because you can get double the combat triggers or whatever. But by itself, it's like even that is not super scary alone as a 3/4 double striker in Commander because things are usually just bigger than that. It's fine. I think this card is a solid maybe. Like if you're in a go wide deck and your meta has a lot of targeted removal spells, then I think throwing it in the 99 is actually pretty decent. Okay, next we have Toby, Beastie Befriender. This is a 3 mana white legendary creature human wizard. It's a 1/1, and when it enters, create a 4/4 white beast creature token with this creature can't attack or block alone, and as long as you control 4 or more creature tokens you control have flying. So this is kind of like a go wide token deck, or a card for a go wide token deck. It's a 1/1, but it comes with a 4/4. The 4/4 can't attack or block by alone, but you know that should be fine. And then when you have a bunch of creatures, all your tokens have flying. This is a fine effect, but it's not super exciting in Commander. I feel like this is much more powerful, like Limited Bomb, for example. It puts 5 power on the battlefield for 3 mana, and then it could eventually like give all your stuff, including the 4/4 flying, when you have enough tokens. That's like well and good, but in Commander, I don't think it translates very well. There's more good effects to give your like tokens flying or whatever, and there's just like more powerful effects outside of that too. It feels kind of bad throwing a child in the trash pile, but yeah, it's trash. Next, we have a new Tyvar. This is Tyvar the Pummeler. This is a 3 mana green legendary creature elf warrior. It's a 3/3. Tap another untapped creature control, and Tyvar gets indestructible until end of turn, and you tap it, and you can pay 5 mana, 3 in double green. Creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So Tyvar is a nice finisher for a go tall deck. Like for example, I have a Galta deck. My commander is a 12/12. My other creatures are also very big. If you drop down Tyvar and then you activate its ability, then all your big creatures, if Galta's on the battlefield, for example, get +12/12. Very, very nice. So it's a really easy win condition finisher type effect for a go tall deck. The downside though is you have to pay 5 mana for the overrun effect, and Tyvar has to be already on the battlefield too. So you have to like if you want to do the finisher ability immediately, you have to pay 3 for Tyvar, then an additional 5, so that's 8 mana total. Or you could play like Tyvar earlier and then like wait, and your opponents all know that you have an overrun effect on the battlefield. The also downside of this one too is it doesn't give trample. Like a lot of overrun effects give your board trample, so you can just like walk over blockers. But this means if you activate it, your opponents can still chump block your attackers, which is a downside. The upside though, Tyvar is 3 mana and can just like randomly be indestructible. So it's very resilient to removal. As long as you have creatures on the battlefield and they are untapped, at least one of them's untapped, at any time you can just tap it. Tyvar's indestructible. You don't have to pay mana or whatever. So it's very resilient to removal, which is really good. Its overrun effect is very like standard. It's not like super exciting or anything, but it will get the job done. And it's very good, obviously, with creatures that already have trample, right? If you mix trample with this, there's no issue whatsoever. Yeah, it's good. I think it's a solid inclusion in go wide, or in go tall decks rather. I don't think it's like super exciting as a commander per se. I could be wrong. It is super reliable that it's going to be sticking around all the time, which is nice. But I think I'm just prefer putting it in the 99 of a go tall deck already, and just use it as a very removal resilient finisher. So yeah, Tyver's great in the 99. There's a lot of green creatures that also act as overrun effects in green. So there's a lot of competition for that role in the deck for a finisher slot, for a finisher overrun effect for Gotal. But Tyver's a fine one. It's also the most resilient one probably. Next we have my baby boy, Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. This is a 4-mana Rakdos legendary creature, Elder Demon. It's a 4/4 flyer. It has ward, pay 2 life. And whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, and draw a card. First of all, kudos to the art. The art looks super sexy. It feels like the end boss for like a Final Fantasy game or something like that. Just really, really cool. So I love the art. I love Rakdos Group Slug, Group Pain. I just like being aggressive and forcing my opponents to act and be pressured and not dawdle too much and deal with me. So Rakdos Group Slug is definitely up my alley immediately. Now, the card itself is incredibly powerful. Valgavoth itself, for 4 mana, you have the potential to draw basically 3 cards and grow it for 3 +1/+1 counters in a typical 4-player game with 3 opponents. All you need to do is drop down like a Roiling Vortex or anything, any permanent that guarantees to do at least 1 damage to each of your opponents on each of their turns. Roiling Vortex does that for 2 mana on enchantment, so it's very hard to deal with too. And then all your opponents are losing life, and you draw a card for each opponent. So if you put down Valgavoth and you already have like a Roiling Vortex, in that turn cycle, the next time it's your turn, Valgavoth is now a 7/7 from a 4/4 flyer. It's a 7/7 flyer now, and you've drawn 3 cards. And then every other turn cycle that Valgavoth's on the battlefield, you're drawing 3 more cards, and Valgavoth grows by 3 more. That's insane for 4 mana. Insane. Like, you have to work for the card drawn stuff, but the working is so minimal because we have so many really powerful ways to guarantee our opponents losing life, so mana efficiently too, that this card snowballs out of control very easily, like without trying very hard. The work is so minimal. So Valgavoth is very, very strong. I think I would argue too strong, honestly. I think it's too easy to get that value. Like, I think you should have worked for it a little bit more, WotC, design wise. Nonetheless, I absolutely love this card. I love this card because I love Rakdos Group Slug. I love being the aggro. I love forcing my opponents to sweat. I love forcing them to stop durdling for a moment and actually deal with me. And that's what Rakdos Group Slug is all about. And that's what Valgavoth is all about. So, you know, if I'm going to be the problem, if I'm going to be the arch enemy, I better be drawing cards, and I better be able to keep up with my angry opponents, basically, if I'm the only aggro player at the table, which 90% of the time, I'm the only aggro player at the table. So yeah, I think it's a little bit overpowered. I think it's a little bit, the work that you have to put to get the value is a little bit too low. But nonetheless, I still love this commander. I love how aggressive it is. I love that it grows super, super fast. And I love that it draws a lot of cards. And the art is super sweet. So yeah, big fan of Valgavoth. I think it's a little bit too strong. I would have said, WotC, make me work for it a little bit more. But nonetheless, I love this card. It's really, really cool. Next, we have another Valgavoth, but this one is very different from the last one. This is Valgavoth Terror Eater. This is a 9-mana black legendary creature, Elder Demon. It's a 9/9 with flying, lifelink. It has ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents, and if a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exiled, it said, and during your turn, you may play cards exiled with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. Wow, this card is like peak Battle Cruiser Magic in 2024. It is not a fair card, but it definitely evokes what like original commander was all about, in my opinion. Elder Dragon Highlander, if you will. It's even an Elder itself. It's not an Elder Dragon, it's an Elder Demon, but close enough. Even when it's not even doing anything, it's a 9/9 flying lifelinker that's very hard to remove with target removal. You have to sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. Pretty significant. Unless you're like the Treasure or Clue deck, then you don't care. It's like whatever. But yeah, the ideal with Valgavoth is essentially smack people with your 9/9 flying lifelinker, gain a bunch of life, and also pressure people in the air. And then you just make sure stuff is going into your opponent's graveyard. It doesn't have to be stuff on the battlefield, by the way. I think the most efficient way is like actually milling your opponents. Like drop down a mesmeric orb and stuff so that they're milling very efficiently. And then whenever it's going into the graveyard, it gets exiled, so it denies graveyard recursion. Also, if like you're killing your opponent's creatures, it denies like death triggers and stuff like that. It ruins aristocrat players. And then on your turn, you get to just cast whatever you exile for free. Like you don't have to pay the mana. You just lose life. And like, oh boo-hoo, I'm losing life. I'm gaining 9 life every single time I'm smacking with Valgavoth. It's fine. And also you're mono black, you have a bunch of ways of gaining life. It's great. So you're basically essentially just like getting a whole bunch of cards and then casting them for free while also just ruining your opponents by denying them death triggers and denying them graveyard recursion. This card is a powerhouse. It is insanely strong. It is not a commander card though. It is not a commander though. This is a 9-drop. It is way too much mana. But nowhere does it say you have to cast it, right? Like, you don't have to cast it from the command zone. You don't have to cast it from hand. This card is literally made to be cheated out. Nobody in the right one, nobody is actually going to be casting it for 9 mana. Very rarely is that ever going to happen. You're going to be cheating it out with, like, the Prismatic Bridge. You're going to be entombing it and reanimating it. You're going to be doing nonsense to do unfair things with this. And then when it's unfair, if you treat its mana cost as 0 and then you read the rest of the text, it's busted. This is a busted card, but it is a 99 card. It is not a command zone card. So yeah, Valgavoth, incredibly strong card, but to reach its full potential, to really abuse it, you want to cheat it out, and that means not putting it in the command zone, rather putting it in the 99. Next we have Victor, Valgavoth Seneschal. It is a 3-mana Orzhov legendary creature human warlock. It's a 3/3 and has Eerie, which is like basically if you took Constellation and you added the word room to it, that is what Eerie is. So whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, and if it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. If it's a third time, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So Victor is a very powerful Enchantress payoff. Just putting a bunch of enchantments on the battlefield means you get to surveil 2 and then discard a card and then reanimate. So Victor is a nice Enchantress payoff, though you have to work for it. The first trigger, like the first enchantment entering the battlefield, surveil 2, whatever. It's fine, but it's like not as much as like a Mesa Enchantress draw card, right? Second time, each opponent discards a card. Okay, now it's getting pretty good. Third time, though, is the money. That's when you get to start reanimating for free. So you have to get 3 enchantments on the battlefield, which is kind of hard to do. It's not super consistent. Not a freebie to do. But once you do that, you surveil 2, each opponent discards a card, and then you also get to reanimate something for no mana. Like that's incredibly efficient for a 3-drop. You have to work for it, and I think the work is legitimate here, but it is a very powerful effect. The payoff is definitely there. Now, do I like it more in the command zone or the 99? Honestly, I think it's good in both. But if you have like a commander that can like poop out enchantments really mana efficiently, then I guess Victor would be better in the 99 there. But I don't know which one that would be off the top of my head, honestly. But yeah, I think I would play it safe and just put in the 99 just because Enchantress has so many good commanders in Orzhov colors already that there's a stiff competition to put in the command zone, and I don't think Victor's like busted enough to like really warrant knocking them all out. It's good in the command zone, but I think it's just a safer bet in the 99. Next we have Winter Cynical Opportunist. It's a 4-mana Golgari legendary creature human warlock. It's a 2/5 with death touch. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards. And Delirium, at the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So this is the face commander for the Golgari Delirium deck, and it tells you what the deck is all about. It's all about self-milling. to get Delirium and then having payoffs for Delirium. So it's a Delirium deck, basically. You want to have, multiple card types in your graveyard, and then what Winter does, not only does it help put multiple card types in the graveyard with its mill trigger, its attack trigger, but also it's a strong payoff of just reanimating any permanent card from the battlefield with a finality counter on it. I know a lot of people will gloss over this commander, and I think like the precon will sell abysmally because casual players absolutely hate, if they're in a graveyard deck, they absolutely hate exiling cards. They would only do it if there was a gun held to their head, I swear. Because all of them think like, oh, if I exile it, it's never coming back for the rest of the game. And what if I wanted to reanimate it again in the future? I don't know if I was going to, but I could have, maybe, who knows? So exiling it feels really bad. And finality counters, everybody I've spoken to that's casual hates finality counters. They're like, well, it denies death triggers. That's one downside, obviously. But also it exiles it, and then it's gone forever. And what if I wanted to reanimate the permanent card again? It's basically like just a lot of casual players hate the idea of exiling in a graveyard deck, just like they hate like mill, for example. If they get milled, they're like, oh, the cards I wanted, they're in the graveyard now, and that is no way to get it back. And I'll never be able to play it again ever. It could have been, those cards could have been at the bottom of my library and I could have never seen it the entire game, but now they're in the graveyard and now I definitely can never get it back. Mill, it sucks. It's awful. So yeah, I think I could say like this card is the best graveyard commander ever printed, and people would still never play it because it exiles and has finality counters. But yeah, for graveyard players who hate exiling though, I have good news for you. Winter is not like super busted or anything. It's like okay, it's fine. It's not even the best face commander of all the precons. I think Valgavoth is the best one out of there. But it is very solid. Like it's reanimation in Golgari that's not limited to creatures, and actually it's probably better to not focus on creatures for this type of deck, and that's very refreshing. Golgari, if you say Golgari graveyard, you just immediately think about reanimating creatures, but this one can reanimate a Zendikar Resurgent. It can reanimate, also it could reanimate a Vorinclex, but it could reanimate like other big things that are permanents, which is really cool. It could reanimate a Bolas' Citadel, for example. Who knows? Ignore the casual haters. Winter is very solid. It's great in the command zone. Okay, now we have the main set Winter. This is Winter Misanthropic Guide. This is a 4-mana Jund legendary creature, human warlock. It's a 3/4 of Ward 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards, and it has Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those card types. Jund keeps having these like really interesting group hug commanders that are not group hug. They are here to make you miserable. They are group pain, but they masquerade as group hug. So at the beginning, Winter's like, hey, y'all get to draw 2 extra cards. Don't you love drawing more cards? And then you read the Delirium part and you're like, oh, I'm going to discard my entire hand. Womp womp. Yeah, Winter is a very interesting commander. I've never seen a design quite like it, where it's group hug, but it also is group heck. Like everybody's losing their hands as soon as Delirium kicks in, and you're in Jund, and you're probably a Delirium deck. Delirium's going to kick in quite soon. So yeah, I don't know what to make heads or tails on this commander. I feel like Winter is going to be just like a group slug deck, where even the card draw is going to come with some pain associated to it. You're going to be running black cards that say whenever your opponents draw a card, they lose life. Maybe you're going to run Orcish Bowmaster to also punish them for drawing extra cards. And then the Delirium part obviously is going to make people sad. Maybe you run like some Staxy effects so they can't even cast the cards in their hand. Maybe you run some Discard Matters stuff. I don't know. It's a very interesting commander. And it's always scary to help your opponents by giving them extra card draw, but there is a lot of build around potential to it. And I don't like group hug. I much prefer group slug, so this is more up my alley. But it also looks like just an arch enemy commander, right? Like if people see Winter at the table, are they not just going to be gunning for it? I don't know. I assume so, but we'll see. Ward 2 definitely helps. I guess commander designers were anticipating the hate that Winter would be getting and be like, maybe give it Ward 2 so it has a chance of surviving a turn cycle or so. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I like it. All right, Winter, great in the command zone. I don't know if I'm going to build around it, but it's definitely piquing my interest. I'll put it like at the top of great of command zone. How about that? All right, next we have Duskmourn, All Questioning. This is a 3-mana Simic legendary creature human wizard. It's a 1/1. At the beginning of your end step, if a land enters the battlefield under your control this turn, and you control a prime number of lands, create Primo, the Indivisible, a legendary 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Then put that many +1/+1 counters on it. This is the nerdiest card I've ever read. This is like, the math nerds are like creaming themselves while looking at this card. I don't know. I don't know if this is a good card, but it is a funny one. It makes a big ol', like it's a lands payoff card, but only for like prime number of lands. It makes a big creature with a lot of +1/+1 counters on there. There's definitely build around potential around it. I don't know if it's a good card, though. Let's look at the token, actually. The token, oh, there's Primo. Oh, I thought it would look goofier, but it just looks like a cute little wolf. Yeah, I don't know. This card just is neat to me. I don't think it's very good, but it's neat. I'll give it that. I've never seen a card that referenced prime numbers before. But yeah, it makes me happy reading this card. Yeah, this one's a maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's good. Who knows? I'm not a math nerd, so math nerds in the chats, let me know if this card's good. Crunch the numbers on it for me, chat, and tell me if this is a good card. Okay, the final new legendary from Duskmourn is Duskmourn, Mystery Unraveler. It's a face commander of the Simic deck. It is a 4-mana Simic, a legendary creature human wizard. It's a 3/3 with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters Manifest Dread, if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, otherwise you may turn a permanent you control face up. So this is landfall matters, so land matters, but also face down matters. So you're mixing the two together. And that's what the precon does, by the way. The stock precon is landfall matters, face down matters, but also +1/+1 counters matters. And it's a mess. The two archetypes do not mix well together at all. And Duskmourn is kind of like a band-aid that kind of puts them together. And if Duskmourn's on the battlefield, hey, it looks like it works together. And if Duskmourn's not on the battlefield, there's no cross synergy here. It's very, very, very odd choice for a stock precon, in my opinion. But the commander itself, I feel, is actually quite powerful. As a commander, I think you're just focusing on landfall. Like, the face down stuff is only to combo off and win the game. There's even a combo in the stock precon, by the way. It involves Eudora and something else I don't quite remember from the stock precon. Basically, if you have like Duskmourn, Eudora, and then like a third piece, like Altered Dementia, if you trigger Duskmourn and Manifest Dread a creature, you can sacrifice it to the Altered Dementia, mill an opponent. Eudora will return that creature that died back onto the battlefield face down as a forest, which will trigger Duskmourn and flip it up into a creature, and then you just sacrifice it again to the Altered Dementia, mill somebody, and then repeat that over and over again for infinite mill and just win the game that way too. I think the stock precon had something where you can just like ramp out all the basic lands from your entire deck. Probably an oversight because they never do infinite combos and the precons. I think it's the first time it's ever happened. It's like an oopsie. But yeah, that's what Duskmourn is as a commander. It's basically just a combo commander, I think. And then I think it's going to see even more play in the 99 of basically Kadena decks. Kadena decks are pretty popular. It's the most popular face down commander, and Duskmourn is a great way of just flipping your morph creatures face up in the 99 of Kadena. So yeah, Duskmourn is very powerful in the command zone, but I think it's going to see even more play in just Kadena lists, so I'm going to put in grade in 99. And there we go. We have ranked all 27 of the brand new legendary creatures that are coming in Duskmourn. Much less than I actually expected. I expected like 50 or so, but I guess they're toning it down a little bit with the legendary creatures maybe. Hopefully, maybe even less next set too. Fingers crossed. Yeah, there's actually a lot of really interesting commanders. There's a lot of favorites, more favorites than I expected, honestly. I'm very excited, the most excited for the Jolly Balloon Man, Valgavoth, and Arabella. I think those are my top 3 ones that I'm very excited to play. They're all red and they're all aggressive, so you can see where I am at mentality wise for Commander these days. I just like being the aggro player. Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to progress the game. I really love the Mind Skinner too, and Nashi. I think those are also very two interesting commanders too. There's a bunch of new commanders that I think are great in the command zone, and a bunch more legendary creatures that are great in the 99. Very few trash and maybes, honestly. Yeah, overall, quite excited for the set. A lot of really cool cards. Also that are not legendary creatures that we didn't cover in the video, but we were doing a podcast. I believe it came out this week, where we talk about just our favorite cards in general. So if you want to see a more generalized look into the best commander cards from the set, check out the podcast to supplement this. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of content. I'll be doing more Duskmourn stuff soon in the form of shorts, where we're going to be doing pre-con upgrades. And then we're going to be going back to like video essays and just budget brews and stuff like that. So yeah, if you like the sound of that, like and subscribe. And until next time, friends, see ya.